The cafeteria noise at Millbrook High suddenly died to complete silence as Jackson Pierce, the 6'5" quarterback, poured an entire carton of chocolate milk over the head of the new transfer student sitting alone. The brown liquid streamed down Riley Bennett's blonde hair, dripping onto the floor, while 200 students held up their phones recording. "This is where charity cases belong," Jackson sneered, his Letterman jacket gleaming under the fluorescent lights. Riley stood up slowly, wiping milk from her face with a napkin. Then she looked directly at Jackson and spoke in a voice so calm it was unsettling. "Jackson Pierce, student ID number 47892. I need you to know that all of your actions are currently being documented as evidence for case file November 77 Alpha." The entire cafeteria froze. No one knew that in 15 minutes, Jackson's life would begin falling apart completely. The silence stretched for what felt like hours. Students who had been laughing and filming suddenly lowered their phones, confused by the shift in atmosphere. Riley's voice had carried across the room with an authority that seemed impossible coming from someone who looked so small and vulnerable. She stood there, chocolate milk still dripping from her sweater, but her posture was perfectly straight. Her eyes focused with laser precision on Jackson's face. "What did you just say?" Jackson asked, his confident smirk wavering for the first time. There was something in Riley's tone that he couldn't quite place, something that made the hair on the back of his neck stand up. "You heard me correctly," Riley replied, pulling out a small notebook from her backpack. As she opened it, students nearby could see pages filled with precise handwriting, dates, times, and what looked like reference numbers. October 15th, 12:23 p.m. Cafeteria assault witnessed by approximately 200 individuals, adding to previous incidents documented in this case file. Ashley Morgan, the self-proclaimed queen of Millbrook High's social hierarchy, stepped forward from her usual table near the windows. Her father owned the largest insurance company in 3 counties, and she'd never met a situation she couldn't control with money or social pressure. "Who do you think you are?" she demanded, her voice sharp with indignation. "Some kind of detective?" Riley didn't even glance at Ashley. Instead, she continued writing in her notebook, her pen moving with practiced efficiency. Ashley Morgan, student ID number 47918, verbal harassment and complicity in assault. Noted. The way Riley recited Ashley's student ID number without hesitation sent a chill through the watching crowd. How could the new girl possibly know these numbers? Student IDs weren't posted anywhere public, and Riley had only been at Millbrook High for 3 days. Jackson felt his control of the situation slipping away. This wasn't how things were supposed to go. New kids, especially scholarship kids like Riley obviously was, were supposed to learn their place quickly and quietly. They certainly weren't supposed to talk like federal agents and take notes like they were building some kind of legal case. "You're crazy," he said, trying to reclaim his authority through volume. "Absolutely crazy. Nobody cares about your little notebook charity case." For the first time since the incident began, Riley looked up from her writing. Her blue eyes met Jackson's with a steadiness that made him unconsciously take a step backward. "Threatening behavior towards a potential witness," she said quietly, making another note. "Documented." Tyler Brooks, Jackson's best friend and fellow football player, pushed through the crowd. At 6'3" and 230 pounds, Tyler was used to intimidating people through sheer physical presence. "What's your problem, freak?" he demanded, moving to stand behind Jackson. "You think writing in a diary is going to scare us?" Riley's pen never stopped moving. Tyler Brooks, student ID number 48037, attempted intimidation of a witness. Physical positioning suggests intent to threaten. She looked up at him with the same unsettling calm. I'd recommend maintaining a distance of at least 6 feet to avoid additional charges." "Charges?" Tyler laughed, but it sounded forced. "What charges? You're just some weird new kid with delusions." "Federal charges," Riley said simply, closing her notebook and placing it carefully back in her backpack. "Obstruction of justice, witness intimidation, conspiracy to commit assault. Should I continue?" The cafeteria had become so quiet that the hum of the vending machines seemed loud. Students were exchanging glances, unsure whether they were witnessing a breakdown or something far more serious. Some had stopped recording, suddenly worried about what they might have captured on their phones. Jackson felt sweat beading on his forehead despite the air conditioning. There was something about Riley's demeanor that reminded him uncomfortably of the FBI agents who had questioned his father about campaign finances last year. The same professional calm, the same precise language, the same way of making everything sound like it was already decided. "You're bluffing," he said, but his voice lacked its usual confidence. "There's no case file. You're just some scholarship kid trying to sound important." Riley pulled her phone from her pocket, and students nearby could see it wasn't a typical teenage smartphone. It looked more official somehow, with a case that seemed designed for durability rather than style. She pressed a button on the side, and a small red light began blinking. "This conversation is now being recorded for evidentiary purposes," she announced to the room. "Anyone who wishes to avoid involvement in a federal investigation may leave the immediate area." The effect was instantaneous. Students began backing away, creating a wide circle around Riley, Jackson, Ashley, and Tyler. Some hurried out of the cafeteria entirely, while others retreated to distant tables, still watching, but no longer willing to be close to whatever was happening. "You can't record us without permission," Ashley protested, though her voice had lost its earlier sharpness. "That's illegal." "Actually," Riley said, her tone taking on the patient quality of someone explaining something obvious, "in the state of Colorado, only one-party consent is required for audio recording. As I am a party to this conversation, no additional permission is needed. However, I appreciate your concern for legal procedure." Ashley's face went pale. The way Riley spoke about legal procedures wasn't something a 17-year-old should know off the top of her head. It was the kind of knowledge that came from training or experience that had nothing to do with high school. Jackson's mind was racing. His father had always told him that in situations like this, the best defense was a strong offense. Don't let the other side control the narrative. "I don't know what kind of game you're playing," he said, forcing aggression back into his voice. "But this is Millbrook High, not some police station. My father is the mayor of this town, and I don't have to listen to some crazy new kid with delusions." "Mayor Thomas Pierce," Riley said, making another note. "Municipal corruption investigation target number 1. I'm well aware of your father's position." The words hit Jackson like a physical blow. How could she possibly know about any investigation? His father had assured him that the FBI inquiry from last year had been resolved, that there were no ongoing issues, but the way Riley spoke, with such certainty and specific knowledge, made Jackson's stomach clench with fear. "You don't know anything about my father," he said, but his voice was shaking now. "Thomas Pierce, elected mayor 2021, currently under federal investigation for bid rigging, embezzlement of municipal funds, and conspiracy to defraud the state education system," Riley recited, as if reading from a report. "Investigation initiated following whistleblower complaints about irregularities in school district construction contracts." The silence that followed was deafening. Jackson felt like the floor was tilting under his feet. Those details weren't public knowledge. The investigation had been kept quiet. with only a handful of people knowing the specific charges being considered. For a high school student to know these details was impossible, unless— "Who are you?" he whispered. Riley closed her notebook and looked around the cafeteria, taking in the faces of students who had gone from entertained to terrified in the span of 10 minutes. "Riley Bennett," she said simply. "Transfer student from Colorado Springs, daughter of Detective Captain Sarah Bennett, currently on assignment with the Federal Task Force investigating municipal corruption in small Colorado town." The revelation hit the room like a bomb. Students who had been whispering fell completely silent. Ashley sank into a nearby chair, her face white as paper. Tyler stepped backward until he hit the wall, staring at Riley like she had just sprouted wings. Jackson felt his knees go weak. This wasn't possible. Federal agents didn't send their teenage daughters to investigate high schools. But everything about Riley's behavior, her knowledge, her calm professionalism, suddenly made terrifying sense. When Riley arrived at Millbrook High just 3 days earlier, she had chosen her seat in the cafeteria carefully. Back corner table, clear view of all entrances, positioned so that her back was to the wall, and she could observe the entire room. It was a habit learned from watching her adoptive mother work undercover operations for 15 years. Detective Captain Sarah Bennett had taken Riley in when she was 12, after Riley's biological parents died in a car accident. Sarah had been the investigating officer, and something about the quiet, observant girl had touched her heart. Over the years, Riley had absorbed more about law enforcement procedures than most police academy graduates. Now, at 17, Riley was technically a civilian. But when the Federal Task Force needed someone to gather intelligence on potential witness intimidation and corruption at the high school level, someone who could observe without arousing suspicion, Riley had volunteered. It was supposed to be simple observation, documenting any unusual behavior or evidence of the Pierce family's influence extending into the school system. She hadn't expected to become a target herself so quickly. Standing in the cafeteria with chocolate milk still dripping from her hair, Riley realized that her cover was blown. But as she looked at Jackson's terrified face and saw Ashley frantically trying to delete something from her phone, she also realized that her mission had just become much more important than simple observation. These weren't just privileged kids acting out. They were potential accomplices in a corruption scheme that reached from the mayor's office down to the school district. And they had just handed her evidence of witness intimidation on a silver platter. When this story moves your heart or reminds you of someone facing similar struggles, please hit that like button to support victims everywhere. Your engagement helps stories about courage and justice reach more people who need to hear them. Riley pulled out her phone again, this time accessing an app that looked nothing like the social media platforms her classmates used. The interface was stark and professional, with options for secure file uploads, encrypted messaging, and emergency protocols. "I need to make a call," she announced to the still-frozen cafeteria. "Anyone who interferes with official federal business will be subject to additional charges." As she dialed, Jackson found his voice again. "You can't do this," he said desperately. "You're just a kid. You don't have any authority here." Riley held up one finger, indicating he should wait while her call connected. "Yes, ma'am," she said into the phone, her voice taking on an even more professional tone. "Phase 1 cover is blown. Recommend immediate escalation to Phase 2. Primary targets have demonstrated clear pattern of witness intimidation and federal obstruction." She paused, listening to the voice on the other end. Students nearby strained to hear, but Riley had turned slightly away, and her voice was too low to make out the other side of the conversation. "Understood," Riley said finally. "Evidence package will be uploaded within the hour. Multiple witnesses present. Multiple recordings available. Request immediate backup for potential safety concerns. As she ended the call, Jackson realized that whatever was happening was far beyond anything he could control or his father could fix with political pressure. This was real federal law enforcement, and he was no longer the powerful mayor's son who could intimidate scholarship kids without consequences. He was a suspect. The bell rang for fifth period, but nobody moved. The normal chaos of students rushing to class was replaced by an eerie stillness as everyone waited to see what would happen next. Riley gathered her belongings methodically, wiping the last of the chocolate milk from her backpack with a wet wipe she produced from a side pocket. As she stood to leave, she turned back to Jackson one final time. "For what it's worth," she said quietly, "this didn't have to happen this way. If you had just let me eat my lunch in peace, you could have graduated and gone to college without any of this touching you. But you chose to make me a target, and in doing so, you made yourself one." Jackson watched helplessly as Riley walked toward the cafeteria exit, her back straight and her step confident. Other students moved out of her way automatically, creating a clear path to the door. Just before she reached the exit, Riley's phone buzzed with a text message. She glanced at it, and for the first time since the incident began, she smiled. It wasn't a happy smile or a triumphant one. It was the smile of someone who had just received confirmation that everything was about to change. Outside in the parking lot, 3 black SUVs were pulling up to the school's main entrance. As Riley walked through the cafeteria doors, the sound of heavy footsteps echoed down the main hallway. Principal Davidson appeared, flanked by 2 men in dark suits who moved with the practiced efficiency of federal agents. The principal's face was pale, sweat beading on his forehead as he tried to keep up with their long strides. "Miss Bennett," one of the agents called out as they approached. "Agent Torres, FBI, we received your signal." Riley nodded professionally. "Agent Torres, primary targets have escalated to direct witness intimidation and assault. Multiple witnesses, recordings available. Recommend immediate intervention." Jackson, who had followed Riley out of the cafeteria along with half the student body, felt his world tilt sideways. This was really happening. The new girl really was working with the FBI, and they were really here for him. "Jackson Pierce?" Agent Torres asked, though his tone made it clear he already knew the answer. "We need to have a conversation." "I want to call my father," Jackson said, his voice cracking. "Your father is currently in federal custody," the second agent, Agent Martinez, replied calmly. "He was arrested approximately 30 minutes ago on charges of embezzlement, bid rigging, and conspiracy to defraud the state education system." Ashley gasped from somewhere behind Jackson. Tyler backed further against the wall, his face white with terror. Students were pulling out phones again, but this time they were recording federal agents in their school hallway. Not a cafeteria confrontation. Principal Davidson stepped forward nervously. "Agents, surely this is a misunderstanding. Jackson is one of our finest students, and Mayor Pierce has been a tremendous supporter of our school district." Agent Torres turned his attention to the principal. "Mr. Davidson, we'll need to speak with you as well. Our investigation has revealed some interesting irregularities in district construction contracts that bear your signature." The color drained completely from Davidson's face. Riley watched with professional detachment as the man who had enabled Jackson's behavior for years suddenly realized his own career was over. The federal investigation into Millbrook's municipal corruption has been ongoing for 18 months, Agent Martinez announced to the gathered crowd of students and teachers. "What you witnessed today was the culmination of an undercover operation designed to document witness intimidation and corruption at the institutional level. Riley felt a strange mix of relief and sadness as she watched her classmates process this information. Relief that her mission was complete, and she could finally drop the act of being a helpless new student. Sadness because she had genuinely hoped to have a normal high school experience, even if only for a few weeks. "Miss Bennett," Agent Torres said, "we'll need your complete report and all documentation you've gathered." "Everything is uploaded to the secure server," Riley replied. "Case file November 77 Alpha contains 43 documented incidents of harassment, 12 instances of potential witness intimidation, and 7 examples of administrative failure to address federal violations." Jackson stared at her in disbelief. 43 incidents? You've only been here 3 days. "I've been monitoring Millbrook High remotely for 6 weeks before arriving," Riley explained. "Social media posts, public records, student complaints that were filed and mysteriously disappeared. Your behavior today was entirely predictable based on established patterns." As federal agents began taking statements from witnesses, Riley noticed Ashley frantically whispering to a small group of girls near the lockers. Even now, faced with federal law enforcement, Ashley was trying to manage the narrative, protect her social position. "Ashley Morgan," Agent Martinez called out, "we'll need to speak with you as well. Your father's insurance company has been processing some very interesting claims related to municipal construction projects." Ashley's face went white. "My father doesn't have anything to do with this." "Corporate insurance fraud is a federal crime, Miss Morgan," the agent replied, "especially when it involves conspiracy to inflate construction costs for municipal projects." Riley watched as Ashley's carefully constructed world began crumbling around her. The girl who had ruled Millbrook High through wealth and social connections was learning that federal law enforcement didn't care about high school hierarchies. Over the next 2 hours, the school was transformed into a crime scene. Students were interviewed, evidence was collected, and the full scope of the corruption network began to emerge. It wasn't just Mayor Pierce and his construction kickbacks. It was insurance fraud, inflated contracts, and a system designed to funnel federal education funds into private pockets. When Riley arrived at school that morning, she had planned to gather a few more weeks of evidence before recommending action. She certainly hadn't expected to have her cover blown by a cafeteria incident. But as she watched Jackson being read his rights for assault on a federal agent, she realized that sometimes the best operations were the ones that went completely off script. "You doing okay?" Agent Torres asked as they prepared to leave the school. "I know maintaining cover at your age isn't easy." Riley nodded, though she felt emotionally drained. "It was harder than I expected, watching them hurt other students and not being able to intervene immediately." "You did good work here," he assured her. "The evidence you gathered will put away a lot of people who thought they were untouchable." As they walked toward the parking lot, Riley's phone buzzed with a text message from her adoptive mother. "Saw the news. Proud of you? Pizza for dinner to celebrate?" Riley smiled, the first genuine smile she'd had in weeks. "Can we make it Chinese food instead? I'm tired of pretending to like things I don't." But as they reached the FBI vehicles, Agent Martinez approached with a troubled expression. "Riley, we've got a problem. The corruption network was bigger than we thought. We're getting reports of similar operations in at least 6 other school districts across Colorado." Riley felt her heart sink. Just when she thought she could go back to being a normal teenager, the investigation was expanding. "What does that mean?" "It means we might need your help again," Agent Torres said carefully. "Different town, different school, different identity. Would you be willing?" Riley looked back at Millbrook High, where students were still gathered in small groups, processing what they had witnessed. Some looked relieved that the bullying culture might finally change. Others looked terrified about what their parents might be involved in. She thought about all the other Riley Bennetts out there, quiet kids being targeted by powerful bullies who thought their money and connections made them untouchable. She thought about corruption networks stealing money meant for education, hurting students who depended on those resources. "Give me 2 weeks to be a normal kid," she said finally. "Then yes, I'll do it again." As the FBI convoy pulled away from Millbrook High, Riley noticed Ashley standing alone by the school entrance, tears streaming down her face, as she tried unsuccessfully to reach her father by phone. In the distance, news vans were already arriving, drawn by reports of federal arrests at the small-town high school. Riley's phone buzzed again, this time with a message from an encrypted number. Operation Millbrook Phase 2 initiated. Next assignment, Jefferson County. Cover identity, Isabella Rodriguez, sophomore transfer. Mission begins Monday. Riley stared at the message for a long moment, then looked at Agent Torres. 2 weeks, right? He gave her a sympathetic smile. The corruption doesn't take breaks, Riley. But we'll make sure you get some time to just be 17. You've earned it. As they drove through downtown Millbrook, Riley could see police cars surrounding City Hall and federal agents carrying evidence boxes from the mayor's office. The town's entire power structure was crumbling because she had documented the truth. But the victory felt incomplete. Jackson would face consequences. Ashley's family investigated. Principal Davidson fired. Yet Riley knew dozens of other schools harbored similar corruption networks, protected by money and power. Her phone buzzed with an unknown number. "Thank you. You saved my life today. Jessica Martinez, Millbrook High Class of 2025. Riley smiled despite her exhaustion. Maybe this wasn't incomplete after all. Maybe it was just the beginning. "Agent Torres," she said quietly, "about that next assignment. I think I'm ready to start Monday." The agent raised an eyebrow. "You sure? 2 weeks off might help." Riley looked at the town they were leaving, where students would return tomorrow to a completely different environment, free from fear. "Phase 1 complete," she said, echoing her earlier call. "Ready for next assignment."
The story ends here, but there are many more videos waiting for you. So, if you enjoy, please take a moment to like, subscribe to the Wrong Target Story channel, and don't forget to turn on the bell. See you in the next story.